Okay, now it
Oh,
says we're live.
now we're live.
Yay. Okay,
Is it
cool.
just us tonight? Is anybody joining us?
Oh, did you invite Ness
I did. I did invite them, yes.
right now? Did you invite them?
Not the second time, but I did send them the original link. Should I invite them again? I probably should, huh?
We look, don't they usually write who will be attending or if someone will be attending on that one page?
Yeah.
Yeah,
No.
I can't pull it up while I have Hangouts open because nothing else works.
I'm pulling it up right now. I'll look.
Okay, cool. I like your tie-dye shirt, Jessa.
Thank you.
I think we'll start.
Yeah, I think we can go ahead and get started. It's coming up on my computer, so I'll know in just a second if it says.
Okay. All right. How are you guys doing on your project, by the way?
Well,
And I hope you don't mind. I'm going to have some string cheese because I didn't eat lunch today. I'm dying. At least it's not crunchy.
It doesn't say anything about them attending on here, so
Do you think I should invite them
if you
again?
invited them, I'd say we're good to go.
okay.
Okay. Well,
Unless
worst
you
case, they can always
invite them.
watch it later. I don't know. Do you think I should? What do we think?
I think just share them the link and then we're going to start.
Yeah.
If they really want to join, they'll find us.
Yeah, they'll find it. Okay. So, I don't even know where to start with chapter 27.
Yeah. I didn't even know that there was this self-regulatory learning process going on.
I thought the same thing because I was going through and I was like, oh, I guess I do that, but I didn't know I didn't know there was a term for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's lots of stuff that's turned out to be that way in this class, hasn't there?
Yeah.
But here the author says that we should train everybody in using those self-regulatory processes, especially in computer-based learning environments. And towards the end of the chapter, he or she mentions that we're not just in computer-based, even in paper-based learning, we should train the learners to use all these self-regulatory learning processes so that the learner gets more effective in learning things like that.
Yeah, and for me, when I read this chapter, I just keep looking at that agent because I think the agent is really probably because the agent is not effective in their program.
I kind of felt like most of the chapter was a big commercial for MetaTutor. I mean, sorry, I'm just saying, you know, but and in that context, this makes a lot of sense. But if you don't have that tool, then it didn't really tell you a lot about how you can train people to do this. I mean, it said it was important to do it within the context of regular instructional content, right? Like not by itself.
Yeah.
But it didn't really tell us how we can train someone to do this outside of using the MetaTutor program. Or did I miss that?
Yeah, but I think one way the author mentioned is about there is a human tutor or a human mentor besides you. So you can always ask questions and get feedback. I think that's one effective way.
Yeah. So maybe in our case, we should ask our instructor of what all cognitive strategies we should use and what all metacognitive strategies we should use on achieving each goals. Does this mean that thing?
I think so. Yeah. Because the example and the studies that they talked about, it showed the benefits and why it was important, but I didn't walk away from the chapter feeling like, okay, here's how I can incorporate this into something that I'm building.
Yeah, even I felt this was all directed towards mainly computer-based learning environments.
That's what I was gonna bring up. What you're talking about now.
Yeah.
Because, sorry, go ahead. Finish and then I'll.
Yeah, all into computer-based, and how this, when multimedia learning is embedded into computer-based learning environments, how they can better incorporate everything and make learning more efficient.
Yeah, I agree, because like whenever you're in a classroom where it's not necessarily on the computer, I felt like this was talking about like what we're doing. We're taking a class online, whereas what I do, I'm there to kind of facilitate their learning and the processes that they're using. So like I remember specifically, like, I'm showing you all of these different things you can do for multiplication, like different ways to multiply using an area model, doing standard algorithm, but it's their job to figure out what they can process the best. Does that make sense, how I'm relating that to this?
Yeah.
Yes.
So you're saying here's 2 or 3 ways that you can arrive at the answer. Pick the one that makes the most sense for the way that you think.
I think that whenever you're on the computer, I think that still happens, but it's your job to regulate that and pick out and say, okay, well, this is going to work best for me, instead of having someone standing right in front of you telling you that that's what you have to do.
Yeah, you're right.
I was also thinking, is it feasible? It will be very expensive, right, to incorporate all these things into an instruction and do everything all together, teach and also teach them all the strategies and approaches. I don't know how feasible all these things are. I don't know if anything is happening right now based on these.
Yeah.
They just gave not only MetaTutor, they gave 2 other examples like Encarta or something, SIS, which also uses the same procedures, but I've never heard of something like that. Maybe I think it will happen sometime in future.
Maybe. What did you say you saw besides the MetaTutor?
ENCARTA.
Where
What
it is?
that?
It's there in the text somewhere. I can't remember where it is. But it's there in the text.
Okay.
It's there under what do we know about multimedia learning of metacognitive strategies, under that heading. It's there. Many laboratory research of multimedia learning of metacognitive strategies are commercially based.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, and this, it gives 2 more examples.
Yeah, I never heard of it.
Yeah, even MetaTutor is new to me.
Yeah, me too.
I don't know any of these either.
Yeah, because I think like during our learning process, like our metacognitive skills, they just like emerge from the daily learning of everything. Like we read a lot of text, and we know like if we cannot understand something, we can reread it. Or there's our teacher there tells like you should have a binder to organize all your papers. I think that's where I got my metacognitive skills, but not through some program like this.
Yeah, also there are assessments in between, right? So if the instructor really understands that we are off way from understanding what's happening, definitely the instructor will give some guidance, right? Like having the guide, the instructor will be giving us guidance like.
Yeah.
Like if you're not understanding this text, why don't you try reading this text with the same content?
And Jessa, you've talked about doing that with your students. If there's somebody who's not getting it, then you can kind of go back through.
Yeah.
Right. But here's a question, or maybe it's going to be a statement. I don't know till I say it, but the part about where it was talking about the metacognitive strategies, it mentioned the higher knowledge learners quite a bit.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering, is this applicable at all to novice learners? And if so, how would we help them understand it?
And I think that's where these programs are coming into play, Kelly, because it says on the bottom of page 649, if you look there, not all students are capable of regulating their self-regulatory processes. So that's where it talks about how researchers and designers are focused on designing the training to help them figure out how to do that.
Okay. So maybe it's just, we're not there yet.
Yeah.
Okay. That makes more sense.
Yeah, and also I remember while I was in 8th grade, I was really bad in learning history. I could read the text, but I couldn't understand what that text was saying. I kept reading repeatedly, but I couldn't understand. It was not a language problem because I could read a science text and understand it well, but the history text was difficult to comprehend, you know. So for students like that, maybe when they do some training on how we can better use, or we might be doing, like they were mentioning about some strategies that was not used effectively in novices, like they were using only note-taking strategies instead of kind of summarizing or drawing things like that. So maybe I was, maybe the instructor's instruction strategy was not really good, or maybe I was using it really a different way or something to study history.
So how did you overcome that?
I got a really bad grade in history.
No judgment for me, because that's how I am with math. I'm hopeless.
So, Soria, if do you science teacher provide you some learning skills so you can learn science really well?
Yes, that was what I was thinking. The science teacher was more interactive, like drawing diagrams, and but the history teacher would simply sit there and say about World War I, World War II, and it was like very boring without any movement itself. He would be just sitting there and just saying stories, and that was kind of boring for me. And because I didn't get anything from the class time, maybe I couldn't comprehend anything from the text too. Maybe that was the reason. But
it sounds like maybe you were disengaged to a degree because there wasn't really any interaction.
Yes. Yeah. There was no active process. Right?
And no images, just words.
Yeah. Maybe that could be the reason. But now I know, by being a more mature learner, now I know if I don't understand this lesson, I might go to Google and type and see or read some other article. I know different ways. I know different strategies.
Also, do other students in your class study the history really well?
Maybe 70-60% of the kids had the same problem like mine. It was boring. Yeah.
Okay.
I think too, a lot of times we're taught, like in high school, we were taught to read and take notes, or we would just simply take notes off the board And I don't know that that's necessarily, I was never, like, even through college, that's the skill that I used to help me study, and it's clearly not the best way to study.
Yeah.
So I don't know that anyone ever, I don't know. I don't know that I ever picked up on a better way to do that. I mean, now that I'm an adult, I can, like you were saying, I can Google something, and I have other skill sets that I use. But as a high school and college student, I took a lot of notes, and
Yeah, me too.
it didn't help.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
that's why I think these kind of training regimens should be more focused to young learners who are not mature enough to find out all these different strategies. And yeah, we know that some young kids, they won't understand how far we try to teach them. They won't understand some skills or some concepts in math or English. So I think these training regimens could help more to younger kids than maybe more mature learners, I think.
Yeah, even just giving them a different skill set other than, hey, go read this and then summarize it in a paragraph. That's not, just give them a different skill set that would help them study in the future. Make studying a little easier, maybe.
But you know what, Jessa, just reminds me about, like, I know there are some workshop being provided in a lot of universities, like, because some of my friends at Miami University, they kind of like struggling students. So if their like GPA is like below 2.5, they need to register a special workshop that teach them like time management skills.
Okay.
Yeah, I think
learn how to study kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that's one way, like how the university like incorporate metacognitive skills, but they never really explicitly taught that along with other courses.
Yeah.
No, I think you're exactly right. I forgot that there were actual courses that taught you how to do things. I never took them.
Yeah.
Maybe I should have at some point. But you're right. Yeah, we definitely did have courses like that. And I think our high school offers something like that as well, where like, well, at the high school level, it's like, did you fill out your planner? Your homework, like things like that.
Yeah.
But you're right. There are special courses for that.
That's a great example, because one of the 6 metacognitive strategies is time monitoring or something, right? What was that? Time
monitoring.
So that could be an example of that time management program. Could be an example of
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah, that's a really good example. Maybe we are not much exposed.
Yeah, I was looking at. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just telling, maybe we are not exposed to training programs that are already present, but we are not much exposed to it.
But I think maybe
I was looking at the table. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Jessa.
No, I just wanted to add one more thing. We're taught that you were talking about if your GPA is 2.5 or lower, what would it hurt to have everyone just take a class like that? I don't think even as a freshman in college, if it was just a mandatory course that everybody had to take to give them that skill base so that they could focus on those things when they go through like their general education courses and stuff like that.
Or maybe there are workshops and I just didn't like really like notice that.
Yeah.
What I was gonna say is I was looking at the table on 653, and some of these things I think are the things that we've talked about that we do, but we didn't really know there was a name for it.
Yeah.
So I mean, some of these things I feel like they're just sort of intrinsic, like you're either gonna get it or not, like the feeling of knowing or the judgment of learning. But some of the things are more like actual strategies, like the self-testing, monitoring progress towards goals, time monitoring,
Content
and
evaluation.
maybe even content evaluation, yeah. Although, I don't know, I mean, some of these chapters I find myself trying to evaluate the content, and it just sort of wraps me around the fence post a little bit. This chapter was very, very weird for me.
It was really tough. Yeah.
I don't know. I felt like as I went through on page 653, I went through the chart and I was kind of thinking to myself, like for the first one, feeling of knowing, I was like, okay, that's whenever I read something and think, oh, hey, I've read that before. Or I think that's where that comes in. And then
and the judgment of learning is like you read something and you go, oh, yeah, that makes sense. Right?
Yeah, or I have no idea what just happened, and you have to go back and reread it.
Yeah.
Because I feel like that happens to me more often.
Yeah.
It says,
sometimes I feel like the more notes I take, the less I'm actually absorbing it. Maybe that's because I'm using my cognitive load in the wrong way. But these last two chapters, I feel like I took way more notes, but it didn't sink in as much. That might just be a symptom of the kind of week I'm having. I don't know.
Even I felt the same thing. I think I will have to go revisit or reread it again and again.
I know. Sometimes I'll be able to read it and get through it quickly, and then other times I'll spend 3 hours reading, and I know it's because I have to keep going back and saying, okay, let me reread that because I don't know what just. What do you guys think about the expectation of adequacy of content? Do you guys assess the expected usefulness of the content? Do you guys do that? Like as you study, or?
Sometimes I do. Like, for instance, with this chapter, all the stuff about the meta tutor, I mean, it was interesting, but as I was reading it, I'm kind of like, okay, so that's nice, but what if we don't have meta tutor? Then what? So I kind of felt like it wasn't useful. I mean, for illustrative purposes, maybe, but I just found myself just continually thinking, all right, but what if we don't have this tool? Then what good is all this information that you're giving me about how great it is? So I'm not sure if that's the same thing as adequacy of content, but I felt like it was.
But I feel like sometimes, like especially I think for the novice learners, I just do not have enough knowledge to judge the adequacy of the content. That's what I thought.
Agreed.
Yes. As a young learner, we have to learn math, English, and they have to learn addition. And my daughter used to ask me, why should I learn all these things? And I used to say, if you want to go shopping when you grow up, you should know how to count. Okay, I used to give examples like that. But when we, as we grow up and during our graduate studies, when we learn something, we definitely think back, right? Can we use this in a career that we are looking forward to? Can we apply this something forward?
Yeah, no, I think that I a lot of things I think back and like, well, okay, well, how do I use that in teaching, or how could I use that? But I was just curious how you guys felt about it.
I still have never found a good use for long division. Why? That's probably because I never really learned it. I just skated through because it was torturous.
Yeah, that's part of my curriculum. They don't like it.
Maybe I need to come and sit in on your class so I can finally learn it.
Well, I can teach you another way to do long division, because like I said, like even with multiplication, I teach them several different ways, but with long division, there's a couple different ways that you can do it. So maybe you would
I
be
just
the
had that bracket thing, and then you like go down and down and down and down, you know,
Yeah,
the
that's what I'm talking
old-fashioned way.
about.
Mm-mm. Hated it.
No. Oh,
So, I mean, one of the things that caught
Are we lost, Kelly?
I think we did.
Oh.
I think that it's maybe raining there, because sometimes whenever it's raining there, she doesn't come through very well.
Yeah.
So will she be able to come back?
Yeah, she's still
She's
there.
frozen. I think she's just frozen. Hopefully it'll like come back to here in a second.
Mm-hmm.
Can we send a message or something?
Kelly.
So are we still on live or?
Yeah,
I'm
we are
assuming
still on.
that we are. I would assume that we are.
Mhm.
I think we have to continue, right?
Yeah.
Kelly
Oh,
left.
Yeah, I think we just continue and she will come back.
hopefully she can. Can she get back into it since she hosted it though?
Is there any link we can share?
Oh, there should be. Can we get the link?
Um, Settings, not here.
Um,
I didn't see any link.
is it only available to her?
Mm.
I don't see you guys. Where did I miss you all?
I think. Oh,
Oh, there she is.
yeah. Hi, Callie.
Hi. So good you're still there.
Welcome back.
We didn't leave you.
Oh, I almost had a heart attack. I was like, what just happened? Okay, well, I'm glad you're all still there.
Are we
So,
still live on your screen?
yes.
Well, then we should be good to go.
Cool. Okay, so what did I miss?
Well, we were just kind of confused as to what happened to you, so we didn't really talk about it. You were getting ready to say something, and then you disappeared. Do you remember what your thought was?
Oh, it's a dangerous question. I was looking at the bottom of 661,
You disappeared.
and it was talking about the scaffolding and fading. And then it sounds like it was saying intended to scaffold the learners by providing them with a set of optimal sub-goals. So I wonder if the scaffolding and the fading not only work with the actual content of the instruction, but also with the strategies too. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I'm not sure how else to describe it, but
Well, it says here that their scaffolding was the questions that they were using to help the learners figure out what their sub goals were, and figuring out their sub goals was one of the skills that they needed. So they were scaffolding those questions to help them with those skills.
to get
and the questions
what
would
they,
have been related to the content.
Right, right.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Am I explaining that correctly? That's what I got out of it.
Yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense. Let me write that down before I forget it.
Yeah, I got this definition of scaffolding from the net. It refers to the process in which the teacher model or demonstrate how to solve problems and then step back, offering support as needed. So they give support when they are needed, and then they set back, or they don't when it's not needed.
Like it's more complete, and then they kind of give less and less so that the student fills in more and more.
Yes.
But if they're doing that based on the content, is that sort of inadvertently helping them with their metacognitive strategies at the same time?
That's what I was saying. Whenever they're providing them with the questions from the content, it's helping them to create those sub-goals, which are part of
the planning, the planning process.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which are part of that skill set.
Yes.
And so a sub-goal might even be something as simple as, okay, this next example is not going to be as complete as the one that I just did, so my sub-goal is to complete this new problem more successfully.
Yeah, it could be anything related to the content.
Okay.
Yeah, it says the declarative knowledge of metacognitive strategies. Everything will be related to something about the content. It could be the circulatory system, one part of the circulatory system, or the other part.
Yeah, the declarative goals. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the skills and those are the procedural metacognitive strategies. Some skills that they need to get to that goal, there'll be the procedural knowledge.
Right.
And I did jot down on 663 the learners that had the tutor and the scaffolding of the strategies were better able to regulate their own learning later. So that's important, I think.
Yeah, that's what scaffolding does.
Yeah. But for here, I think what a tutor really do is, I think the most important part of the tutor being there is they can provide immediate feedback.
Yeah.
So it's like kind of go back to what I learned before, like for this meta tutor program, I think the most important part is tutor feedback, even with or no matter with or without the agent there, like.
Yeah, even I remember that scene in the meta tutor when they were doing some destructive task. They were shown videos and were asked to give feedback whether they were using this correct self-regulatory process, and they were asked to give a response as yes or no. And if the student was giving no, the guide was asking, or the instructor here will be asking to go back, and they'll be going back and watching the video again 3 times, and again if the learner comes back with the wrong answer, then Gavin, the guide, gives the explanation and asks them to proceed. So that's what is important in adaptive scaffolding. But in fixed scaffolding, it is a regulated kind of learning, right? Just with paper, the computer screen, there is no interaction.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And also it says that in adaptive scaffolding, they use the more effective learning strategies. While in fixed scaffolding, they use the note-taking, copying methods.
Right, like the verbatim notes. Yeah.
Yes.
that was really meta because when I read that, I was like writing it down. I'm like, wait a minute, this is exactly what I'm doing. I think that's where I really got twisted.
Even I thought of the same, but what I was thinking is if we keep summarizing, we lose a lot of time, right?
Mm-hmm.
I tried to apply that strategy, but I was looking at the time and then I thought I'll just go maybe try it the next time.
Yeah, exactly.
Or maybe teach kids to do that.
Yeah, and I think one thing like I noticed for like kind of for this whole book is many principles, strategies can apply to the learning of science, but not they never mention about like for learning arts or music, something like that.
Yes.
So I'm really wondering like is there any like metacognitive strategies to teach people learning music or fine art? Yeah, I'm very curious about this.
It says somewhere in the text also that only it looks into science and math and not into reading and other areas. I think it's an emerging research. Maybe there
Yeah,
is.
because on page 664, it lists like a whole bunch of reasons for the current state of the field. Because there's a lack of training studies and a lack of focus on the non-multimedia learning. I think like I don't know. It just seemed like there was a lot of reasons why it's not going on.
Yeah, and also I've read several places that it's happening in laboratory conditions and not in real world student. You know, in such conditions also the research results can be very different, right? In real classroom situations, things can change.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know what was interesting was I kind of felt like I was back in the comfort zone under the section where it talks about the implications for cognitive theory. And then it had all these models, you know, the SOI, COPES, SMART, you know. Then I was like, okay, yeah, now I'm back where I understand this. So,
no, have you learned about the COPES process? I am hearing that for the first time.
That's the first time I've heard it too.
Okay.
Although it makes sense though.
Yeah. We have only heard about SOI, right?
Right. Actually, the SMART was new as well.
Yes, COPES SMART was new.
Yeah.
Maybe we are missing some chapters, right? It might be.
Probably.
Maybe, yeah. So I guess if we had to define what we were going to take away from this chapter, on page 666, I circled some of the, like, it was talking about the implications for design.
Yeah.
And it said the system should be based on the multimedia learning principles.
Yes.
Second, the environment should provide adaptive scaffolding and modeling, etc. Third, the environment needs to be designed so as to model, prompt, and support learner self-regulatory processes.
Yeah. And here in the regulatory, self-regulatory processes, they are including not just the cognitive and the metacognitive processes. They also included motivational, affective behavior. It's new, right? Motivational. I don't know how they will include all those things.
Yeah. It's really difficult.
I guess this is the closest thing that we have, though, to okay, so all this information is really interesting, but how are we going to apply it in what we're doing? So this page kind of, I felt like everything else they just should have taken out, and we just should have had this page. But
Yeah, such a system, development of such a system, designing such an instruction will be very complex.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it's hard because some of those things like motivation or behavior is going to be different for every single learner. So you have to figure out how you're going to be able to make accommodations for those kinds of things as well.
Yep. How do you deal with that? I mean, I know you've talked a little bit about like groups, Jessa, in your class, but what about like individuals? Like if there's some, I mean, I'm sure there's probably like special needs kids who have extra support or something, but
Yeah.
based on your class, what do you usually see in terms of how different the kids are with their needs in terms of how they're going to learn?
Well, the kids with specific learning disabilities, they have an IEP, which would be an individualized education plan. So that's where the intervention specialist comes in, and we work together to meet specific needs for that child. So like maybe if they really struggle with reading and they're at a lower level, they'll have a different goal than everybody else in the class. But as far as behavior goes, there are some who have behavior goals written into their IEP, so that goes along with that. But for a student that doesn't have an IEP, that's something that you as a teacher just have to take control over in your classroom. So you could do, like I've seen some teachers will do like a behavior contract with a kid who struggles with behavior. So like you could help them to set goals for themselves, like if I don't get in trouble today, or if I maybe targeting some of the specific, like if a kid won't leave his shoes on or hits another kid or something like that, like I will not touch anyone today. You can be more specific with those goals, and then if they meet those goals, then they can help set their rewards, and then they're way more motivated to meet those goals. So it just depends on the kid. Like I said, if they have an IEP, sometimes those goals are there, but otherwise it's just kind of up to you how you want to approach it.
Okay.
Yeah, and also for like some students with IEP in my like previous student teaching school, the intervention specialist will provide something like read out aloud before they're going to take a test into another room, or the teacher will provide some student like guided notes, like fill in the blank notes for the student with special needs.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. So, anything else on the chapter, you guys? I wonder what he's going to ask us on the exam from this one.
Yeah.
It's a little scary.
Like, why is it important to have both cognitive and metacognitive? Why does the learner need to know both the strategies to be effective?
Yep, you're probably right.
Yeah. I think it's just we are being introduced to some of these cognitive strategies and why it's being important to train, what role it does in learning, and why it's very important to train students to use those strategies. Because there might be students who are not at all using any of these and struggling to learn. So for such students, such a training thing might be very helpful, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Next chapter was comparatively easier than this one.
Yeah. It's good to be. So this chapter made a lot more sense to me. I don't know about you guys.
Yeah, compared
Yeah, it's much better.
So here too, first of all, at the initial period I was confused of what they were talking about when they were talking about physical systems, what they really meant.
Mm-hmm.
So
As you went through the chapter, though, did it become clear what they were talking about?
a kind of, not exactly.
For me too.
Yeah.
I was thinking of a physical system as like a mechanical process or an ecosystem, like a forest or something, or a, a process,
Okay.
or like something biological, like the circulatory system in your body. Like something that's physical, like you can't hand somebody a circulatory system theoretically and say, here, you can learn from this. So they have to make these representations of it with these models.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it was talking about the different ways that that can be done and what can be effective, either more effective or less effective
Okay.
when you're trying to create that representation,
Mm-hmm.
either on a screen or on a page.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think also on like page 674, there's a kind of like summary based on what Kelly said. Like in the middle paragraph, the physical system kind of involved three different components. The first one is the knowledge of the components of the system.
Yeah.
Like there are multiple stuff in the system, and the second one is how the components interact each other.
Mm-hmm.
And the last one is like understanding the function of the system. So I think like
What's it
anything,
designed for?
yeah, like anything
Yeah.
involved these three elements can be like considered as a physical system in this chapter. This
Yeah.
is what I thought.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. The other thing that I really enjoyed about this chapter was thinking about how like the word representation was used a lot, and that kind of helped me stay honed in on the point of the chapter. So maybe like with 27, maybe some of these it has to do with the way it's written because there's different people writing all these chapters. I don't know.
Yeah.
But anyway, they were talking about the different representations and how each learner will create an internal or a mental representation of what they're seeing,
Yeah.
and how the different methods of showing the representation in the instruction can either impede the internal representation being created correctly, or it can help it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was also talking about the visual versus the verbal a little bit on 676. And I felt like on some of these explanations they got into a few of the other principles a little bit, like the split attention and the redundancy in that.
Yeah.
There was one. Sorry, go ahead.
They were segmenting to somewhere. I think
Yes.
in animations or somewhere. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, because it was talking about like if someone is looking at a diagram or a series of pictures or animation of a system and then they're hearing the explanation of it, then you get more of that dual coding.
Yeah.
Versus having to look at the picture and then look at an explanation of it and then look back at the picture. So I felt like that was really important.
Yeah.
It says that some instructions or some information about the diagram could not be fully conveyed through the diagrams. like some invisible elements like force, wind, things like that, which could be only explained through text or through narration. Here they don't use narration; they use commentary, right?
Right. Yeah, they do. I wrote down narration anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, the thing about showing the movement in that, like the on 679, it has that weather map where it shows the arrows representing the wind currents in that. And then later in the chapter somewhere, it also talked about it might have been the pulleys, the pulley system or a gear system, and it was saying that when they presented that image to someone with the arrows that showed the direction of the parts, that they could explain how that machinery or whatever it was worked.
Yeah.
And they did it inherently, like without being asked. But then if they just see a diagram of the machine without the arrows, they would just talk about the components or the parts of it and not the movement at all. I thought that was really interesting.
Then it talks about the physical systems in different media, like first in static diagrams. There it gives so many characteristics, like physical systems are iconic. As you said, these iconic diagrams, they do not represent all the visual features. Like the pulley system that you mentioned, it just represents as a circle, a diagram, but you don't know how actually the shape or size of that pulley is, right? And then another characteristics was it could be representations can be schematic, like some aspects of the reference will be there, but some other aspects won't be there. Like they showed two examples of an organic molecule, one with a 3D shape and another with wedges and dashes. So in one, representations of all atoms won't be present. And it also says that understanding diagrams depends on how we can decode all these conventions. We should know what these wedges means and what these dashes means when you look into the diagram.
Yeah, I remember seeing diagrams before, or even like maps and things where it would show, or even graphs, like it would show you, okay, the blue dashed line means this, and the red dotted line means that.
Yeah, so like the legends
underneath. Yeah.
Yeah, and I also think the orientation reference are really helpful. Yeah, I never think of them before, but like when you read a map, all the map definitely like have a north point on that.
So I have a question for you guys. On page 678, it's in the last paragraph. I saw a word that I've never seen before.
Yeah, me too.
And I Googled this word, and the only reference on the entire internet to this word is about this book. Did you guys see that?
Yeah, I did the same thing, Kelly. And what I did is I splitted that word, okay, into two. One
split it.
Like ability.
Like ability. Yeah, like that would be ability, but then what's the rest of it?
What's
really?
Priyavini? What is that? I didn't think separated.
In Sanskrit.
Not a clue.
In Sanskrit, a language called Sanskrit in ancient India, Praveen means knowledge.
Oh.
Yeah. Not pre-aveen, it's praveen. There is no E in between, but it's Praveen means knowledge or skill.
So maybe that's like something that it's a translation error of some sort.
Mm-hmm.
It could be ability to know or ability to infer.
Yeah, I think, yeah, the ability to know or to infer. I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll go with that.
This is the best we could do.
Yeah,
I'm
even
glad that you
I,
thought to split that up. I didn't. I just
yeah.
didn't know what it was.
Yeah, I kind of was feeling the ability part, like that did make me think of ability.
Uh-huh.
But the pre-Avini, I'm like, what is that? And then it really, really cracked me up when I Googled it, and the only result, and I've never Googled anything and gotten just one result
One result.
ever.
Yeah.
And it was about this book, and I just had to laugh. Funny.
What did you guys think about the animated diagrams? I found that I think a lot of times I use a lot of animated diagrams in science, especially whenever I'm teaching about space, because it's hard enough for them to wrap their head around, you know, the Earth is in space. It's so big that they have a hard time wrapping their head around it. So instead of just showing them a static diagram, I show them one that's animated so that they can actually see like the movement of the planets and how, like, why a year on Mercury is so much shorter than a year on Saturn and things like that, that I don't think that they could comprehend just hearing it. I think it's important that they would be able to see that kind of model.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
even I felt it was very helpful because we can see the movement, right? Even like it says that showing the 3D structure when it rotates in a place, we can see it from all the directions.
Mm-hmm.
Then that could actually help, right? When I was learning, when we do a cell culture or everything, what's seen inside is from a cross-section view, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you could see part by part in a 3D form, then I think we could remember that more. I am not sure, but
That made me think of, sometimes they show pictures of the cross section and it's like slices,
yeah,
like as the scan goes through your head.
yeah.
And I had that once myself because I had like a sinus issue, and so it was either a CAT scan or an MRI, and it showed like slices of my head all the way up and down. And it would show like a little small piece where my nose started, like here, and then it would be bigger, 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 and then it would be gone once the slicing got past my nose, you know? I just thought that was the most fascinating thing I'd ever seen.
That
But
yeah,
one of the things I think about the animation, I think it's important, but I feel like there would be a potential for people to maybe rely on it too much, and have it be more passive, and therefore the student wouldn't um, be as interactive in terms of trying to create their own mental animation. I feel like the concept of somebody creating that mental animation is really, really important. I
yeah,
mean, sometimes it's not going to be possible if you're a novice to something. If you're seeing the planets for the first time and you don't understand about orbit, it may not work, but maybe for higher knowledge learners. And it did talk about that a little bit, like the series of static diagrams and having someone mentally animate them had yielded, I think, stronger results, at least in one study.
And I also think another problem about using animated diagrams is like when we teach our students, make our instructions, we use motion pictures from the students going to take a test. I assume most of the tests are just on paper with static images. So it really needs students' ability to translate all the static images because the tests are going to be in that form, but not animations.
Yeah.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I agree with you that there has to be some transfer there. But I think that since a lot of the testing is going to online, I think that in the future we could see a lot of that. Because I know even on for the Ohio Air Science test, one of the example questions was like, it had to do with an ecosystem and it with invasive species, and it gave them like a little picture, and it came in and the truck came down and chopped down something and took it away, and they introduced another species and it grew in front of them. So they had to be able to look at that and see that and understand what was happening in the animation in order to answer the question. So I think you're right. If we're going to test them on one way, that they need to see that in the instruction. So I think that, yeah, I think you make a really good point, because at that point we hadn't done anything like that in class, so my kids were like, I don't know how to interpret this. I don't know what this means.
Yeah. So that's one good reason to incorporate more multimedia and animations into your classroom.
Because that was our first year taking any kind of test online, so I was glad that they gave that as an example so that I could prepare them in case there was something like that on there. But up until that point, they had never taken a test where they had to watch something and do that, because it had always just been on paper for them.
Okay.
Saying your student teaching that you mentioned, I guess I kind of assumed that you were teaching like a freshman level college class, but it sounds like maybe you might have taught younger students?
In middle school.
Middle school, okay.
Yeah.
You may have said that and I forgot, sorry.
That's fine.
Okay. Is that what you want to do for a career?
I'm still not sure, because like maybe I'm going to go back to China next year.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. Cool. So, what else?
Oh, I was looking on page 682, and I made a little note. I know we were talking about how it relates to some of the other principles. At the bottom where it talks about, or, well, I guess it's in the middle, the last part of relations between different representations. It talks about a text can be either separate from a diagram or integrated within it, and I just made a little note, like with the split attention principle, wouldn't you want your text to be integrated with it, so that that didn't happen?
Yeah, I thought about that too because I wrote down redundant descriptions versus complementary. So I don't know if you guys remember a few weeks ago I was trying to wrap my head around what was redundant and what wasn't. So the word complementary cleared that right up, so that was good. And then they also in this chapter use the word contiguous, which I thought was helpful in terms of like a non-split attention description.
Yeah.
The spatial contiguity principle, spatial and temporal.
And the other thing I thought was really super cool, I know somebody mentioned it once before about the orientation, but on 685, I'm not quite sure what kind of bone that is. It almost looks like a pelvis or a hip or something, but like it shows the orientation on the top with the line and the dot, and then when they turn it, you can tell exactly how it's been turned because those lines, give you that reference. whereas the other one, it's like you're going, okay, is that a different bone, you know?
Yeah.
So that part I thought was really important. That's something that I never gave any thought to,
Yeah.
the orientation piece.
Yeah. It says that low ability students or learners, they are not very good with the spatial, what do you say, spatial things. So for such students that
Spatial ability.
spatial ability, so for such students that orientation reference is very important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it also like let me keep thinking about, is there like any way to train someone with low special ability to increase their special ability?
That's a really good question.
I remember somewhere that in for low ability students that phase diagrams, remember the phase diagrams where each step of the process is explained.
Mm-hmm.
Those diagrams are more effective for low ability students because they can
Oh, there she is.
Sorry, guys.
because they can involve in an active process of
Mm-hmm.
seeing what happens at each step.
Yes. Yeah, and either they're thinking about the difference between each diagram or each picture in the series and how things changed,
Yes,
or they're going to that mental animation.
yes, mental animation, yes.
Another thing that made me think of as well was like inference uh, based on a series of pictures and saying, I don't know if you remember this. Do you remember that comic book thing that
Oh
we
yeah.
were supposed to read for visual literacy?
Mm-hmm.
And it was about comic strips, but it wasn't just about comics. It was about kind of
Yeah.
that's a way to represent a story.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so it had like a series of pictures, and I think it was like a guy with a knife, and he was following somebody into a building, and then the next frame was like a just a really far back view of the building, and it showed like a eek, like a scream coming out of the building,
Mm-hmm.
and you could infer from
Yeah.
that last frame that the guy with the knife had killed the person that went into the building. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I don't know
yeah,
if you
yeah.
can makes
Mm-hmm.
any sense if you hadn't seen it, but that the fact that you can infer things without it being explicitly illustrated, I
Yeah.
feel like kind
Mm-hmm.
of has to do with the mental animation maybe.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Um,
and that's one advantage or advantage that they are saying of static diagrams than the animations. They say that in animation everything happens all of a sudden, and do you remember they're speaking about inattention blindness? We look
yes.
only to one face, one step at a time, and skip the other process that's going on. So if it is in phase diagrams and each step is in a different set of frame, then we can look into step by step.
hmm And
You guys
also
Yeah.
the piece
Mm-hmm.
about it being transient,
Yeah.
right?
Yes. Yes.
So you can go back.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Mm-hmm.
Justin,
Mm-hmm.
what were you going to say?
That's okay.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened. I've never been kicked off the internet here before, but that's what happened. So I checked my phone to like see if that had connection, and Nasia sent us an email, and she said she didn't get an invitation and was asking if we're still planning on meeting. So I don't know if we want to try to like call her into the last couple minutes or just let her know what happened.
Oh.
I know we've all been having trouble with her. Well, I have.
Yeah.
But I
I
just
can.
saw that on there,
Can
and I
you
wanted to
can
let you
you
guys
give an
know.
invitation right now from this page? I don't know where to do it.
I probably can.
But I know that we don't have very much time left. Um,
Yeah.
I
How,
just wanted to let you guys know that I saw that if we
okay.
wanted.
That's weird. I wonder why she didn't get it. How about this? I mean, she would just pop on for the last couple minutes if she's still available anyway, but because that was at 6:24, so I'll email her back when we hang up,
Okay.
and just let her know what happened,
Okay.
and then she can watch the replay. That's weird. I thought for sure I included her on there.
No,
I goofed
we
it
have
up.
to invite each and every person while we start, right?
Yeah.
As you
Yeah.
called me, you have to invite her too.
Yeah, I thought that I did, but I guess I didn't do it right, or maybe I spelled her email incorrectly or something.
Yeah, you might have emailed that OU ID instead of the Gmail.
Maybe.
I think she'll understand. Hopefully she'll have time to watch it otherwise.
Yeah, I'll answer her as soon as we're done.
Okay. I just wanted to let you guys know that she was
Yeah.
wondering what happened.
My fault.
It's okay.
No, you're fine.
It happens.
Okay.
It was your first time, so.
Then the
Yeah.
text talks about how can we make these animations more effective, because we talked about the transient nature. Then it can limit the learning. It's a more passive process. And also there is a mismatch between the format of animation and the realistic internal mental models. The next one, it talks about how we can make animations more effective, and it talks about two principles, the apprehension principle and the resemblance principle.
Mhm. Yeah, you know what was interesting? When I got to that part, and the word apprehension made me immediately think about being apprehensive about something, like hesitant or unsure or worried about it or whatever, because that's usually the context in which I hear that word. But then after I kind of read through it, I thought of, like if you ever watch like cop dramas or whatever, which I don't, but they talk about apprehending a suspect. And then I was like, oh, so apprehend can also mean, like, apprehension can also mean to apprehend something or understand it or gain it. So
Yeah.
that was interesting for me because I had never thought of that word in that context before.
Yeah. And there too, it gives about two ways or two design principles through which we can improve this perception and comprehension. That is the interactive control and the attention signal.
Mm-hmm.
Like transiency, it happens when the information goes from one frame to another before we can actually comprehend it, right? So if we can pause it, the slider bar or something they were talking, if we can pause it or if we can revisit or replay it,
Mm-hmm.
then we can make more use of animation.
Yeah.
Then about the attention signal, it says that arrows are not much effective. It is usually the coloring cues
Mm-hmm.
that's more effective.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, even
Mm-hmm.
Think the arrows, but then I guess the arrows might be somewhat extraneous. Like you would end up fixing your attention on the arrow versus what it's pointing at.
yeah,
That was
like
interesting.
yeah, like if you are explaining about the circulatory system of or how the blood flows through a heart, if you use a red color and show the flowing, then the arrows,
Mm-hmm.
that would be more effective, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, any of you use these two principles in your project?
No, I'm
No,
think, I'm thinking of
I
using
can
coloring.
for this chapter.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, I want to use some like interactivities, but for the color cues, it's really difficult to make, like because I do not have that technology skill. Like insert an arrow is really easy for me, but I really don't know how to use a color cueing.
Yeah. And then in this page 690, there is an error in the last paragraph. Did you notice that?
No, I missed that one. Where is it?
There have been few studies addressing Swerke's. It's not apprehension, it's actually resemblance principle.
Oh.
The last, instead of apprehensive, it is resemblance principle. That animation should be designed to correspond the type of internal representation.
Huh. Wow, good catch.
It's under the resemblance principle that they says about the segmentation effect.
Mm-hmm.
Also, in that, I think it was like the last two sentences of that page, where they talked about people tend to perceive a sequence of events rather than continuous motion, even if they see animation. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. Then developing mental models from multimedia presentations, they talk about how these can affect their comprehension, two types of relation in respect to content relation and format relation.
Mm-hmm.
There too, that as you mentioned that, Kelly, before, the dual code, how the verbal description provides information in verbal code and the other code, which is effective.
Mm-hmm. What else?
I think we have covered the content.
Yeah, I think what you were saying there kind of sums up the last chapter where you were talking about how multimedia displays are more effective when there's verbal
Instruction.
that goes along with it, which makes perfect sense to me. Like if I'm looking at a diagram and someone is also explaining it to me, I'm going to understand it far more than if I was just looking at it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I guess that kind of for our projects, if we were showing a diagram, we could do a voiceover and explain what was happening in the diagram as someone looked at it, which makes sense to me. And that's kind of what Nisia did in her example of the project.
Right.
With the solar system, she was talking to us and then explaining what was happening. So.
Yeah. And that's the modality principle, that narration.
Mm-hmm.
Modality, is that what you said?
Yes.
Yeah.
In this chapter, the summary was really good. I like the summary very much. Summary and conclusion is actually summarized everything.
Mm-hmm. So, I don't know. Anything else from this chapter?
Actually, I think we are done.
Yeah.
It says that if the referent is dynamic, then animations are more realistic. And if it's static, then iconic diagrams are more realistic than a verbal description. Then if the external representation is isomorphic to reality, then understanding depends upon the perception process. And if it's abstract from reality, then the cognitive processes such as inferences are effective.
Mm-hmm.
And again, they're saying that multimedia comprehension is an active process of knowledge construction.
Yes.
Again, it says that students with low domain knowledge or low spatial ability, they are difficult to comprehend the multimedia displays.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any limitations of current research being mentioned in this chapter?
I think he went there.
Yeah, the last about something eye tracking, the math. New research should be on how people comprehend multimedia displays that combine spatial, mathematical with verbal representation
What page are you on?
by using eye tracking.
Which page?
Each page
It's 696 because it talks about how eye tracking could also be useful in the research program. So,
the last line before summary.
Oh, yeah.
I see it.
I think that's the only thing regarding, and everything needs more information here, right? It's
more studies. We need more studies.
Well, Siang just keeps bringing up all these really good questions nobody can answer. Like, someone has low spatial ability. How can we teach them to have better spatial ability?
Yeah. Probably draw more pictures.
Yeah.
I really admire the fact that you're thinking about those kinds of questions as you're reading all this. 'Cause I'm like reading it, like trying to desperately make sure I absorb it, you know, and like thinking of all new stuff. So.
Yeah, make
Thank
some
you.
mental representation, right?
Yes, you're a much more evolved student.
Wow, thank you so much.
All right, ladies. So,
I think that's it.
yeah, I think so too.
Can we just stop broadcasting and talk a little bit about the project, Kelly?
Yeah.
Just a few questions.
Stop. Right.